presentation on in the afterwards for the next one. Okay, so if you don't know BCM already, hello. Just a quick introduction. We are a charity. We support small voluntary and community organisations in Birmingham. And the way that we do that is through face-to-face, which has been quite difficult during the pandemic. But we really, really believe in the importance and the value of peer support. So, as I said before, we don't want this to be a broadcast to you. We want everyone in the room to feel that they've got something to share, and others you can learn from each other, but also we can teach each other. So please do treat this as a chance to, give your own sort of information and share what you know as well. Okay, so if you haven't already, but I think everyone in the room has, just introduce yourself. I said we're recording this session for internal use. Feel free to put your cameras on and off during the session. If you could keep the mics off like everyone's done, then that's great, but do either use the chat box to ask questions, or if you want to speak, and we really do encourage you to ask questions verbally as well, then just raise your hand using the raise hand button, and we'll call upon you. I probably should have said who I was as well. My name's Jo, so I work for Birmingham Community Matters as the coordinator. Afsari, who's just popped her video off, is probably responding to a request for a link. Afsari is our development assistant, and we're the two people employed by BCM to run our sessions. And Francesca, who will introduce herself very shortly, is one of our associates, and we've just started with Francesca, but she's got a whole wealth of knowledge and experience that we're really happy to have on board here. Okay, on that note, I will stop sharing my screen and pass over to Francesca.
Great, thank you so much, Jo. Well, good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you today for the safeguarding session. Hopefully, can everyone see my screen okay? Yeah, fantastic. So as Jo mentioned, I'm Francesca. I'm an associate with Birmingham Community Matters. I'm really, really thrilled to be delivering this workshop with you today. So I'm a coach and a trainer and a mentor by profession, and I have quite a range of experience working around safeguarding, having worked with local authority as well as private, voluntary and independent organisations. And so we really do want you to get the most out of this session, so please do feel free to ask questions either in the chat or raise your hand and we can respond verbally and also have some discussions around it. I'm very aware that you're all coming from probably very varied backgrounds and maybe a range of experience within safeguarding, and so hopefully there'll be something in it for everybody, but let's make a start. So the first question is, do we need a safeguarding policy? And when we ask that question, it's helpful to really then get a breakdown as to what is safeguarding. Because for some people, safeguarding, we can think the extreme and some child protection things, but actually safeguarding is really the first word. It's really safe. It's how do we keep everybody safe? And so some definitions we're going to look at is when it comes to adults, NHS England defines safeguarding as protecting a person's right to live in safety, free from abuse and neglect. And I think we'd all agree that that's something that we want for ourselves as well as for all our service users, the communities we work with, the families we support maybe. And so it's really about keeping people safe. And then that's so safeguarding vulnerable adults. And then when it comes to safeguarding children and young people, the definition says it's about promoting the welfare and protecting them from harm. Safeguarding means protecting children from abuse and maltreatment, preventing harm to children's health and development, ensuring children grow up with the provision of safe and effective care, and then taking action to enable all children and young people to have the best outcomes. So again, it's about keeping everybody safe and promoting welfare. So safeguarding is something that we actually do as part of our everyday life. We just may not call it safeguarding. Okay, but when it comes to organizations, we are looking at it a little bit more formally. Okay, everyone okay with those definitions? So why might this be relevant? So does your group work with children or teens, either in capacity of a service user or even, as a volunteer, then safeguarding will be relevant to yourself. So if any of the staff or volunteers are under the age of 18, it's going to be relevant. Does your group support vulnerable adults or engage with them as service users? I can see a few nods, which is really helpful to see. And well, then yes, safeguarding is going to be relevant to yourselves. And again, are any of the staff or volunteers vulnerable adults? I think a lot of us work in a very inclusive way. And so for the majority of us, these people we come into contact with as part of our organised activities. And so in order to make sure that everybody is safe, it therefore is relevant to have a safeguarding policy in place. And by nature of your organisation, you probably already work within or promoting safe working practices. But this is just to really bring it all together and make sure we're all speaking the same language and we've got similar understandings as well. Okay. So when it comes to safeguarding, what do we need to consider? So we need to consider best practice. And what that looks like is that, well, I said before, everyone's doing the right things at the right time and in the right ways as well. Depending on people's experiences, they may react or approach a situation quite differently. And when it comes to our organised activities that we work with the community, we want to make sure that everyone is doing things in the way that's appropriate. And within Birmingham, there is a set of procedures we follow to really safeguard or to protect both children, young people, and vulnerable adults as well. Okay, so we're going to they'll have a clearly defined practice. And so within safeguarding, what's the practice of your group? What does it look like for your organisation? And what's the culture within yourselves as to how you work in a safe way? And those are the things that will really underpin your safeguarding policy. And then when we speak about the word policy, that really refers to what we do. And then the procedure is how we do it. So we want to protect children. And then the procedure is the how is, well, we make sure that, our staff work in a safe way, that the language they use is appropriate. They're not asking people to do things that are not appropriate. And so that's where the policy and the procedure go hand in hand as well. Okay. All right. So I'm just having a look at what's in the chat. Absolutely. Emma made a really great statement there that we like to assume that everyone, particularly volunteers, might be vulnerable and they need to be looked after. That way we don't make any assumptions. And yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So some of the common barriers that people have around safeguarding is that there's concerns about getting it wrong, and for those of us who work in communities and with people, we like to get things right because we genuinely care and we want the best for people. And so sometimes we can be concerned about getting it wrong, so we don't perhaps really take it on board. But this is why we're here, to learn together, to share practice, and to really get things in place as well. Sometimes people may be concerned about the implications of safeguarding, but the most important thing is that it's your responsibility to notice and be aware of concerns and to raise it, but then you're not deciding anything after that point. Yeah. So there are people who are educated and very experienced and they're qualified and it's their job to make the appropriate decisions. It's our job to raise a concern and to share it with that appropriate person as well. And actually sometimes by even raising that concern, it can really stop a lot of things happening. And so in that way, it becomes a really positive step, and it forms part of the work that we do. Okay, so you can definitely not get it wrong with safeguarding, and the implications hopefully will be to promoting safety for everybody as well. Another barrier that some people face is that they could be unsure as to what should be in the policy, and that's why we're here today to again support you with that. Because if you've ever worked in any organisation, there's lots of policies in there, and sometimes the language is quite overwhelming and inflated, and we kind of feel a little bit stuck as to where to begin. And I think we all want to work in a very practical way where everything really, really makes sense. So we're going to alleviate all of these barriers to really support you and your groups to have in place appropriate safeguarding. Okay, any questions at this point? Everyone comfortable with what we've done so far? Yeah, okay, fantastic. All right, so I will just...
I have one question, sorry.
Please do.
Sorry, I'm Nadima, and I run the Multicultural Community Group in Edgbaston. I think some of them know me.
Okay.
I've been running my group now for 4 years, and I've been covering the whole COVID-19 activities, via delivery or cooking food and etc. We do a lot, so I won't go into it. But what I'm basically saying, because I'm already I've already got my safeguarding training for children and vulnerable adults, but I've been doing it for years and years, so I know I know what it's all about. But what I'm saying, as a group, because I run my own group now, because this is my own sort of fun, something that I founded and I'm running. If I had an issue if there was an issue in my group with somebody or something, I mean, I would know how to handle it, because obviously I'm trained for it. But if there was a situation where I couldn't sort of deal with it, would I then take it to my chairman, or what would I do there? Because that's it's been a bit of a thingy for me, that where would I take it if I had to?
Sure, I think it depends on the structure of your organization and the roles that people play.
Okay.
So if you have do you say you've got a chair?
Yeah, we've got a chairman, yeah.
Yeah, so if they have the role of a designated personal safeguarding lead, well, then that may be the appropriate person to almost escalate it to. But it depends on the situation. But yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, within every organisation, there should be someone you can.
Yeah. Because I suppose when you're employed by someone, it's a different matter. But if it's your own thing that you're running, so you've just got to be a bit careful, and got to make sure that everything's in place. That was the question I was a bit stuck on.
Yes, and I think Emma, you've got something to add to this.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi Nadine. I think if you're you had an experience of being in a bigger organisation that had the structures, and kind of your job was to be part of it and not to be in charge.
Yeah,
you're in charge. So I think Francesca will come into more of the details next about processes and procedures. But the key thing would be, if you're the person day to day involved in the organisation and you have a concern, then at the end of this session we're giving you phone numbers.
Okay.
And it's as if you're in charge day to day, it would be your job to report either as an emergency, or through the phone numbers we'll give you at the end.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you.
To whoever whether it's vulnerable adults or children.
Yeah. Okay.
Then what you would do as part of that process is keep a note. You would make a note of what you've done and share that with, you'd include your chair or your trustees or your special in any emails that you sent, and you'd keep that way. You'd keep the record. So if you're responding immediately, you respond immediately, and then you would note it back. Make sure there was a note back to somebody afterwards.
Oh, great! Thank you for that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Emma. Any other questions from anybody? Okay, so if you do, feel free to, like we said, put it in the chat or just come off mute and ask your question. But we will then, the next step is actually then to create a safeguarding policy, or if you have one in place already, we can just make sure that it's as it needs to be. Okay. So what is it? What a safeguarding policy and procedure should cover, and also we've got a template to share with you today. So what should go into the safeguarding policy is a safeguarding statement. And that says what exactly it is that you do as your organisation to safeguard children, young people, and vulnerable adults as well. As well as that, the purpose of your organisation. Sometimes when we've been working something for a long time, we can almost assume that everyone knows what we do, but it's really helpful to be very clear on what the purpose of your organisation is. So when you've got new volunteers coming on board, or you happen to have perhaps any new staff or service users, that they can then have a good understanding of what exactly you're there to do, and then the steps you take to ensure safe practices. So that is both to prevent anything from happening, but also should something occur, the steps you then take as a result of that. And so Emma mentioned about having particular numbers that you will contact, which we have in the policy, and who you refer to. Also, it should go into the policy, the roles and responsibilities. Now, by default, as people living in this country and, you know, working the way we work, everybody is responsible for safeguarding. And so it's important to note that if somebody is the designated safeguarding lead or designated safeguarding person, it's not all that one person's responsibility. All of us, we're all responsible for safeguarding, which means if we notice something, we have a responsibility to share it and to raise it and go to the appropriate person or the next steps as well. And so in that respect, it's a group effort and it's collective as well. So hopefully no one's going to feel too burdened by the responsibility of safeguarding. It's what we do day to day. Yeah. And in the same way that if you notice something, even in your neighborhood or when you're out walking and you raise it as a concern, you're technically safeguarding. You're already working in those ways as well. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this screen and actually share the actual policy, which I believe you've all received by email as well. So can you all see that? Just scroll right to the top. So it's a template for children, young people and vulnerable adults. Yep, so it's a safeguarding policy for community and voluntary groups. So the writing in red is what you can then amend and update to really reflect your organisation, okay, or organisations or group names that you're working with. And it's a policy template for community groups which contains reference to procedures. And it must be amended to meet the requirements of your organisation and ensure that it is consistent with current legislation and good practice guidance. It should be read alongside your own organisation's safeguarding procedures. And once this document is finalised within your organisation, it needs to be agreed at governance level. So whatever that looks like for yourselves at that appropriate level, and then cascaded and shared to everyone, to all employees, contractors, trustees, volunteers, and everyone who's involved, so they know their responsibilities in terms of safeguarding children, young people and vulnerable adults who access the community group. Okay. And so at the beginning, we've got a document control, and it's so important that it's reviewed at least every 12 months or as and when policy changes. So, you know, if there's a change in the law or there's a change within your organization, that may impact how the policy needs to be amended. And so it's really making sure that that's done and almost scheduled in every single year. And so I do think that we can be really, really organized and literally plan it in the diary as a yearly update, that we look at the safeguarding policy and then we make note of the version number, what changes have been made, the date it's been reviewed and will come up again, and also the person involved as well, so that we're really clear as to who's been involved in this policy. Okay. So I'm not going to read this out line by line because it's quite a lot, but I'm going to just give it a skim, you know, an overview of the section. And so again, your organisation name, and so it's important to be very clear that you recognise the duty of care to safeguard and promote the welfare of children, young people and vulnerable adults, and is committed to safeguarding practices. Okay, and so that's your opening statement, because that is what you are doing, and it's helpful to have that as well. And so then it just explains that it looks like it recognises the welfare of children, it covers all children irrespective of, you know, gender, age, ethnicity, disability, you know, sexual orientation, all of those aspects. We make sure that we safeguard children in a really fair way as well, and vulnerable adults. When it comes to vulnerable adults, like Emma put in the chat earlier, we want to assume that every adult is vulnerable when they come and work with us. That way, then we're not making an assumption as to their levels or ability, but we're safeguarding everybody as well. Okay, and it's also to be done in partnership with the same children, young people, and vulnerable adults, but also people who care for them, other agencies, and everyone's involved in really supporting safeguarding. Okay, so it looks at the purpose of your organisation that I mentioned as well. There's a statement there that failure to comply with the policy and related procedures will be addressed without delay. And that also safeguards you. So if you are overseeing or you're leading your organisation and you have a new volunteer that comes on board and they're not adhering to this, that statement in there then allows you to take various steps, because we want to ensure that everyone complies with what it is we're doing within safeguarding. Okay, so we've got definitions from the Children's Act as to what a definition of a child is, which is anyone who's not yet reached their 18th birthday. So you may have volunteers who are under 18. They're also afforded the rights of this policy. And then again, the definition of adults and vulnerable adults and adults at risk. So although we've spoken about safeguarding, child abuse or child protection is really in response to something very serious happening. Again, there's a definition of what exactly that looks like. Okay, so let me talk about child abuse, and then a breakdown of the different types of abuse. And it's very unfortunate, but in our society these things do happen, and so we do want to just have an awareness about bullying and cyberbullying and child criminal exploitation and domestic violence. Again, that's all part of these aspects. And so to be able to have this conversation with your volunteers so that it's not overwhelming if they're reading these terms, but we're just able to acknowledge it and address it and raise it as a concern. Okay. So then it speaks more a little bit about how we safeguard and what that includes, the legal framework that it covers. And there's a great link to NSPTC, which is the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. And so they're the leading body that really takes care of safeguarding. And again, you can refer some of your volunteers to them if they want to know more information. Okay. Training and awareness. So there's a responsibility to ensure that there's been an appropriate level of safeguarding training. Sorry, is it Nora? I didn't catch your name. You mentioned that you've done safeguarding training before. And Nadima, sorry about that. So you mentioned you've done safeguarding training before, but then, oh, you're still on mute.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I recently just did it in January 2020, child protection and safeguarding for Birmingham City Council. So, and then there was the lockdown because I was doing chaperone job as well.
Sure. And and was that a day course? Was it a few hours? How long was that as a course?
Yeah, it was yes, it was it 2 days? I think it was I think, yeah, I had to go. Yeah, it was 2 days. 2 days. I had to go. It was 2 different separate trainings.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously, where I was, employed before, I was working with vulnerable adults, blind, disabled, all the categories, and so I was trained every time through my employers. But then when I set up my own thing, obviously, I had to look into all this. But I mean, I was told that the policies that I've got from my training covers me to do because I know how to handle it. But it was just so yeah, that's what I needed to know. But yeah, I've got them all.
Brilliant, thank you so much for sharing. And
sorry,
that's fine. No, not everybody may need to do a full 2-day safeguarding course because there's lots of information and there's lots of
I mean, but obviously it had to be done because of the job that I applied for. Yeah,
absolutely. But then as a community group, it's just an appropriate level of safeguarding.
Yeah.
So that's appropriate to everybody, and that's to ensure that everyone knows what safeguarding is, what their role is within safeguarding, how to recognise if there's an issue that arises, and also the importance of how to report a concern and knowing then how to do that, in addition to understanding the dignity and respect when working with children and people and vulnerable adults as well, and have knowledge of the policy. So that's what a basic training should cover. And again, as an organisation, it's deciding how that should work best for yourselves as well. Okay, so the policy also covers confidentiality and information sharing. And so we know that that's a big issue in our society at the moment, isn't it? Making sure that our data is safe and that we're kept safe. But when it comes to safeguarding, if there's a concern, that becomes the priority to share it with the appropriate people as well. And that's the local authority or the police if it's an immediate serious situation as well. Okay. And so this policy is also going to be done in conjunction with your own existing policies around confidentiality or information sharing, if you have those in place, or a statement that you have, that will also suffice, because this is best practice. Yeah. Recording and record keeping. So if you were to raise a concern, it's having that noted somewhere safe, and again, sharing it with the right person as well. And all records must be kept securely and confidentially stored in line with the GDPR as well. Okay. Safe recruitment and selection. You know, how do you find your volunteers? Do they come to you? Do you seek them? And how do we make sure that they work in a safe way? I know there's been lots of discussions around what was the old CRBs or now the DBS checks in place. And, you know, all your volunteers may not need a DBS check in place, but that's not the only way to safeguard. You know, our daily working practices really help us to safeguard those who we work with as well. But at the same time, it's to ensure that everyone is recruited safely and there's no sort of ongoing concerns. Again, social media, how do you manage your social media policy to make sure people are kept safe? If there's use of mobile phones and digital technology, again, thinking in advance what that needs to look like to make sure that children, young people and vulnerable adults are kept safe and they're not able to access anything inappropriate. Okay. We've also got the whistleblowing policy. Yeah, Emma said it's a bit overwhelming how many policies we need. There is quite a number, and it's reflecting what that needs to look like for you, I think, and really just perhaps looking at statements that are relevant. Okay, and we've got whistleblowing. So if there's a concern, you know, that someone's doing wrong within the organisation, that we sort of raise that as a concern as well. So the information that is really important to be shared with volunteers and sessional staff is the procedures. That's what to do if they have a concern, okay? And that's to report it to the leader or of the voluntary session, okay? Who will take note of it. And then either themselves or the trustee will then raise it with Birmingham local authority. And so if it's about a child, there is the Children's Advice and Support Service, or if it's an adult, there's adult social care as well. So that's the really important aspects, that people know who they need to ring or email if they've got a concern, but also then they've got access to a phone or an email to be able to raise that as a concern as well. However, if you believe the child, young person or vulnerable adult is in immediate danger, you contact the police. Yep, on 999. Okay. And so then important contacts is going to be who is the safeguarding trustee within your organisation or the safeguarding lead. Okay. And then the Birmingham City Council referral forms, referral numbers, and obviously the emergency as well as NSPCC. So if you were not sure, you could always ring the NSPCC to ask for some advice as well. In some respect, it's much better to raise a concern and rather than not raise as a concern, because they will then decide if it needs to go further or not as well. Okay. And so depending on the makeup of your organisation, it may not be a trustee you have, it could be a member of staff or a committee member who has that role really within safeguarding. And I do think it's important to take note that every organisation has a different structure and therefore a slightly different format as to what's going to work best for yourself as well. Joy, you've said if a concern is raised, does a decision need to be made to decide whether to escalate to local authority? I think if you have a concern, you take it to local authority who make the decision as to what to do next. Yeah, that's the best way to do things. So if you have a concern, raise it, and then they'll decide what to do. So they may say they may advise you. Well, they will advise you as to what to do next, if anything, but they will most likely take that on board as well.
Can I just jump in there, just to share an experience I had exactly on that, Joy, in a last job, and somebody reported to me a situation that they weren't sure if this person was being bullied by their neighbours. So I used to work for a housing association, so it was kind of a little bit, it felt very much sort of hearsay, and the person that reported it to me wasn't sure, you know, about who was involved or that. So there was a lot of gaps in it. But this person felt something wasn't right, and the person that she thought was being bullied had sort of was quite vulnerable in terms of their mental health. And I had that exact thought, like, is this, you know, should I escalate this? But my experience in phoning the number in the council, so I talked to my manager and I reported it to the council, was that they were so, there was none of that kind of like, oh, you know, that no, you're just making a fuss, or they were just very, very supportive of like, you know, that information, and they understood that I might not have all the details and that kind of stuff. It reassured me, but what it also made me realise is that you don't have to have all the evidence stacked up, you know, in front of you, and to know exactly what the kind of either the protection issue or the issue is. Just that feeling that something isn't right, and that really stuck with me. Like, even if it's not about what we're doing as an organisation, but it's somebody in our community or someone we come across, it's still the same. It's still, we have that responsibility. It really brought it home to me.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing, Emma. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. Joy? Do you want to come off?
No, I'm just picking this point up a little bit more. My experiences as being a Senko in a school, so I saw a lot of this go on, and we always had to make a judgment because as to whether or not we were going to escalate this about children. It was a primary school. And more often than not, we didn't. But what we did was, it was always written down, actually on yellow pieces of paper, so that everybody knew that those yellow pieces of paper that went around the school, and they were circulated to people that were in contact with that particular child, so that if there was more information that came in, they knew about it, and we would get more communications back to the lead. And if we needed to escalate it, we would. Now, obviously, there was a lot of information coming in all the time about children and what's going on, and people misconstruing what's going on, and there were occasionally, and it was occasional, things that we took forward to the authority. My experience of the authority is not very good, actually. They didn't act very often. But it obviously was a different department. It would have been the education department, which is why I asked whether or not an organisation, if I was on a glean and somebody said they didn't like the way somebody was talking to somebody else, it probably would be better for me to go and ask that person to tone down the language rather than pass it on. So that's the reason I asked about that, really, putting it into context. But I do appreciate because you've been a community capacity and possibly rubbing shoulders with people that are genuinely vulnerable and those that might want to do harm to them.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing, Joy. And, you know, school experience is quite different because a child will always have lots of contact with a professional, whereas in the community it can be quite different. And I also definitely take note that it's almost little pieces of the jigsaw puzzle coming together. And so, you know, we're definitely not the ones to say, well, should it or should it not? Actually, if it's concerned, raise it. And then if it's going to be part of something else ongoing, because we don't know what else is going on for that individual and for that person as well. And so, you know, they will take a judgment call, because there is obviously thresholds that the local authority have as to what a concern needs to look like. But it is important to take notice. Absolutely. So thank you so much for sharing, Joy. Do we have any other questions at this point? Can I ask, how are we feeling about the policy? Because I definitely know that sometimes it's a lot of words, it's a lot of information, and it can feel at times a little bit overwhelming. But I do think it's important to note that this is most likely what all of you are doing anyway, but it's to really just, you know, make it a little bit more formal. So when you're doing organised activities, everyone is clear on your safeguarding practices.
Sorry, I would like to say something.
Yeah,
would there be some kind of obviously, because if this policy is going to be ours for our community group or whatever we're running, would there be some kind of like help from yourselves or from anybody where, you know, to help us sort of write it out, you know, where it needs to be written? Any kind of support or help for that?
I think the best thing is that you take that template away,
yeah,
and make the changes that are relevant for your group,
Okay.
And then
okay.
you can send it back to us to have a check over.
Oh, okay.
In
No
case
problem.
we've missed anything. I mean,
Okay.
my question was about the policy has lots of other policies, which we may or may not already have, or we might have and they're out of date. So I think one of the things, with my BCM hat on, is maybe we need to be looking at producing templates for those as well,
Right.
to help
Okay.
you out. Because
Okay.
a lot of it refers to other things,
Yeah.
which lots of groups, I know there's something about lockdown, we've all gone and looked at our policies and gone, oh, they're all out of date. Yeah, that might be something we need to do some additional help on in providing templates for all the other things that we've referred you to.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, have a go at drafting your own version out and then come back with it if you've got any questions.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation, and the last thing is really looking at who is responsible, which we did mention earlier was everybody. And so we've got the service users who are involved in the communities and the groups, we've got volunteers and possibly staff, committee members and trustees, and then we've mentioned, a designated safeguarding person or a lead. I put two because different organisations refer to the roles in different ways, but it's that person who would take a bit more of a lead responsibility. And so where perhaps they've had more training or more experience, that may be the appropriate person. And obviously then there's a committee chair as well. So everybody's responsible for safeguarding. We said it's a group effort. It's not one person's, but we're all making sure we're working in safe ways, as well as that we're responding to any concerns or any needs as well. Okay, and so that ends the formal part of the actual presentation. Do we have any more questions? Let's see something in the chat there. Let's have a little look.
It's a comment from Joy about assessing your level of responsibility and to make sure it's appropriate and proportionate. They're all really good words as well. Do you feel like, Joy, do you hold like a chair or vice chair in your organisation? How are you set up?
We're a very new group and we're just starting to get going. I spoke to Emma Wolf about setting it up and getting it more formal. At the moment, we're still in between times. I have been on gleans. For those that don't know, going gleaning is to go and pick fruit and vegetables that farmers can't sell, that are in the fields, that they've produced too much or whatever, and putting it into the free food system. Which means that, I would like at the end of the day to be able to take teenagers and to take vulnerable adults out into the countryside to do this, which is why we're going to need the safeguarding. Probably this year that won't happen, but obviously from where I've come from, it's all very much belt and braces, and I was really responsible. I was a safeguarding lead in my school, so I did know that if I had been a classroom assistant, that it was just my responsibility to pass things on. But then I was thinking, well, who to? And how does this work? Well, having come on this, I can see that I can phone somebody up. And when I'm in that, as you said, Francesca, that unsure situation, do I, don't I, will I, won't I? I think I can, from my previous capacity, I could sort out what I don't need to pass. But when I'm in that unsure phase, yes, it would be very useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that, particularly with teenagers, because I had this situation actually just last week, I delivered some mentoring and had a session planned out, and the young person just started sharing a situation that was happening currently. And so I said, I explained to them, I've got concerns, I'm going to have to share it with somebody else. And, my role was just to pass the information on to the appropriate person, because what I didn't know was actually there's a lot going on outside of what she shared with me. And so I'm adding to the picture. And so when it comes to working with young people, particularly if you've built an amazing rapport with them, they feel comfortable, you're getting on really well, they may start sharing with you things they've not shared with anybody, and they may start sharing things that are safeguarding, and they may not even know that they're wrong. And so I think this is really just to help all of the volunteers and possibly whoever else is involved, just have the confidence that if they do hear something, that they know, okay, I'm going to maybe fill out this form, or I'm going to ring this number, and I've done my role within safeguarding. So it's really stripping it back to sharing the information with the appropriate person to keep somebody else safe. Yeah. Please. Yeah.
The thing that we used to share with, I mean, I used to say it to the people generally in school. If it's something that, if it worries you to the extent that if you get what we call good secrets and bad secrets in school with children, if it's a good secret, it makes you feel happy. If it's a bad secret, it makes you feel sad. And if it's a bad secret, you tell somebody. And I used to say that to the adults as well as the children, because I think if you're going away and worrying about it, and you're not going away and you're bouncing, yes, this is lovely, I love it. I think that's the moment, really.
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Brilliant, thank you. Sharon and Emma and Carol. Hello, Carol, as well. Did you have anything you wanted to add or ask, or anything that's just in your mind now? Like, I think, Francesca, thank you. You know, you really reflected the fact that this is a process as well. This is just, you know, if you don't have the policy, if you don't know what you're going to do in that situation, that is okay. You know, it's something that is, you know, a process to get it within your group or organisation. Yes, Sharon.
I think along the way I did have questions, but they were actually answered. It was more about where do I follow through, who do I contact? So that answered my question. But other than that, no, I have no other questions. If I did, I definitely would have mentioned them.
Thank you, Sharon.
Right. Carol and Emma, did you want to? Hi, Carol.
It's as Emma said, there's policies within the policies. And I'm grateful that we'll be able to ask yourselves anything that we're stuck on. And it is a good idea to try. I have got something in place, but it's just good to see if the options there that I can ask you to just look over it to see if it is appropriate, because when you're dealing, one of the ones for me is I deal with the adults mostly, but I deal with family. And for me, the children one is like a minefield. So it helps that, as Emma's put in the chat, we're not there to be experts on everything. And it is good to signpost over. It's just to have that down in the policies so that the volunteers don't feel that they have to, or the lead has to do everything. It can be passed on to people who are experts.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carol.
Great. Lovely. And other Emma, not Emma Wolf. You don't have any other questions? That's fantastic. Yeah. So hopefully you should have all received the template that we sent out before the session today. But if you didn't get it, if it's not in your emails, just let us know, and we're happy to send it out. And like Emma Wolf said, you know, have a look through, have a go. If there's any bits you're not sure of, we're happy to have a little, you know, to have a chat through those. I mean, Francesca's done an amazing job at simplifying, and I think, you know, that's the key with all of this. If we keep it simple, it's so easy then to, you know, tell other people about it, get other people on board. We just need to do a number on the whistleblowing and the social media.
Yeah. I was going to say, Joe, if we'll stay on afterwards anyway, but I think our next priority will be to draft out templates of those for groups, and we'll share those with you as soon as we've got them. Useful. They're much harder to do as templates because everybody's organisation is different. We'll do it with sort of options of things you can leave in and things you can take out. They're less anxiety inducing than the safeguarding one. I don't know about anybody else, but the safeguarding one feels anxiety inducing. So, you know, those are more about what do you choose for your organisation, whereas safeguarding feels like we've got to get it right. So we'll take that on as a job to do, I think, to get those sorted.
Absolutely.
You said generously.
No, I agree. Yeah, fantastic. Well, if people don't have any other questions or comments, we'll draw it to a close there and say thank you very much. It's been lovely seeing you there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you to Francesca as well. That was fab.
Thank you, Francesca.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
So yeah, please do stay in. I actually need to share a little bit about. I'm going to share just the last one about staying in touch with BCM. So you should all have our email address, but you know, just to let you know that as well as this session, we help with all manner of things related to running your voluntary and community organisation. Joyce and Nadima have already said. So we can help you, matching you the person one-to-one. If you want us to feedback on the changes you've made to that template, we're more than happy to do so. And yeah, if you're not already signed up to our newsletter, you can do that via our website as well. And just
one more thing before I go. I just want to thank you. Actually, I forgot because I haven't had the chance to. I do want to thank you because you did help me with my constitution, and it went through. It was fine.
Oh, wow. We'll take that, thanks, but it's not an easy task to get that through. So I think you must have done some.
Yeah, and thank you to Afsari as well. She did help me a lot, bless her.
Brilliant. That's fab. I can see a couple of bits in the chat. Brilliant, lovely. Well, it's been lovely to see you all. We'll leave it there, but yeah, do stay in touch, and we'll see you at the next. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye all. Bye.
Thank you.
Well done, Francesca.